Welcome back to Project Sunday. So today we went back and we began to do some work in earnest on the dental cabinet. The initial phase, which was just relocating it, bringing it in, taking the drawers out, that was sort of small potatoes. Now I actually began taking it apart. So you're going to get to see that when we come. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, boy, this project is taking forever. And yes, it is, because I have about a half an hour's work a week, and I'm videoing it and sharing it with you. So, because I've already made this commitment, I'm taking you along every step of the way. It's going to take a while. But the good news is I'm not in a hurry. And I think in the end, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be very glad that the whole process was well documented. Motorcycles, what fun. One of these days, just quick digression, I am going to sit out on the patio and I am going to film everything that comes by my house and share it with you. Because today I had horse trailers, I had a cat, that's what they call it, a thing that digs up dirt and just riding down the street on its own, a lawnmower on the back of a trailer, a kid on a skateboard, countless motorcycles, and a manure truck. And that's just what I counted today. So I'm going to go out. I'm going to give you the show from my patio one of these days. It's amazing. For a quiet back road, sometimes it's anything but. All right, end of digression. Back to the dental cabinet. Let's take a look at sort of where we started off. So we have a non-rainy day, which means we are going to be able to go back to work on the dental cabinet. So, step over here. And what we are doing today is going to require 3 important tools, and make no mistake about it. These are important. Baggies, and I got a whole box of them. Screwdriver and marking pen. Because we're going to start taking things apart. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the knobs. Now this knob is sort of floating around loose, and when I reinstall it, of course, I'm going to make sure I put it in a little tighter. I am going to take out these hinges as well, because please notice, the hinges are painted on the outside. Now, some people don't mind that. They've got no problem. It's very small. I kind of have a problem with that. I don't like my hardware painted over. So I'm going to be taking these apart, and I'm going to be snapping pictures as I go. Actually, I don't need to snap pictures. I'll just probably hold on to the video, because I want to make sure everything goes back together the way it came apart. So when I am through pulling these hinges out, each set of hinges is going into its own baggie, and it's going to be marked. So we'll have left top, left bottom, center top, center bottom, etc. The knobs I'm going to check, but the knobs should be fine, all going into the same baggie. So we will pick up in a minute. Now those hinges are not normal hinges. They're very tricky little buggers, and that's why I want to document how they go together. I should also tell you, I don't think I took them apart in the best possible way. So when I put them back together, I'm going to have to see if maybe there wasn't a more clever way to take them apart and put them together. I just sort of started unscrewing things and hoped for the best. But I think there's a method to the madness. I think when I put it back together, I will attach pieces to the doors and then screw it into the opening. In other words, I think this is another time when you need to let me make the mistakes so you don't have to. I suppose there are a dozen ways to take these things apart and put them back together, but I'm sure there's actually a right way. And we're going to sort of trial and error figure out what that is. So before we get much farther along in our little process, I want to show you my screwdriver. Actually, before we get started, I'm going to show you my favorite screwdriver. This is what it is when you take it all apart. This piece slides in here, this piece slides in here, and then when it goes into the handle, you can flip it. Straight head, Phillips head. This does not live in my toolbox. This lives in a drawer in my kitchen because, well, we spoke about that overloaded junk drawer, because this is my go-to screwdriver. This one is a Stanley brand. I like it, but you can pick these up very inexpensively. If you don't have one, I would strongly suggest you go out, take a look at it, because a good quality screwdriver, especially one like this, it's got two different sizes of Phillips heads, two different sizes of straight heads. It is remarkably versatile, and boy, it's like the handiest thing you will ever buy. Now that is a very, very handy tool because it has a total of 4 different sized heads, 2 flat and 2 Phillips. And it handles almost anything I need around the house. For the cabinet, I may have to get a smaller screwdriver head. Not because I actually... 3 trucks in a row. Great. Not because I actually need a head that's smaller for the screws, but when screws are painted over, and this is going to help explain why I don't like painted hardware. When screws are painted over, paint gets in the screwdriver slots, which is a problem with a straight head screw, but a disaster with a Phillips. You can actually clog the whole little crisscross hole, and you end up having to pick it out, and that's absurd. With a flat screw, you can usually just scrape it out. No point in going through that. No point in putting yourself through that if you can avoid it. So I'm going to do the work now so that I don't have a problem later. And when I get all of that hardware off, it's going to soak in a pan of paint remover to get all that paint off. Yes, it's a lot of bother to take the hardware off before you paint something. But if you're going to paint something and do it right, that's what you need to do. And you'll be glad you did if you ever need to take it apart in the future. So let's take a look. Next up is the starting of the process of this hinge removal. So before I go any further along with the project, I want to make sure I capture this so that I know where this piece goes. And it's going to slide right back in here. You can see the outline. And that is going into this bag along with this little piece once I pop it out. And this is going to be marked, obviously, left hinges. I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of these. So each of those hinges, the top and the bottom, are two-part hinges. One part attaches to the door, the other part attaches to the cabinet opening. They slide in, and there's nothing but that tiny little bump, which will be brass. It is brass. Right now it's painted brass. Eventually it will be brass-colored brass. And so it's almost invisible. Certainly way back when this cabinet was made, it was about as close to an invisible hinge as they got. Very, very interesting design. I found out one of the screws is missing, so I'm going to need to replace that. I will have to dig through my stash of screws and see if I have something close. These are old screws, and you can usually tell how old a piece is by whether or not it has Phillips screws. Phillips screws have been commonly used in all kinds of assembly, probably for the last 40 odd years. So if you have a straight head, that's the screw with just one little slash through it. If you have a straight head screw, it probably dates from the mid-century or earlier. If you have a Phillips, you're looking at 70s or later. And that's just in general, because Phillips head screws have been around for a while, but they are easier to use in factories than a straight screw, because the screwdriver head can slip from side to side. But with a Phillips, because of that crisscross design, the driver is pretty much locked into the screw head, and there's less chance of slipping. So it's a good way to date the piece. A solid brass screw with a straight head, which is what I'm dealing with, usually dates from 1940s or earlier. After the 1940s, you started seeing steel screws. You didn't see brass so much. Brass are softer screws, so the technology has improved. But I'm going to stick with brass for the screw I have to replace, if possible. And I hope it will be, because that's what's in there right now. And I do save old screws. Honestly, I am a screw hoarder. You give me an old screw and I've got a little coffee can that it's going to go into, because you never know when you're going to need them, and it's very hard to get old screws these days. You go into a store, you say, I'm looking for a screw. It's hard to get the kind they used to make. So, into the screw can, see if I can't turn up a screw that will be a good replacement for the one that's missing. So, next up, so remember, one missing screw, we're dealing with that already. Next up, we're taking a look at the broken door. That is going to be the next fix that we have to deal with. Now, this is what I really wanted to get to. This is the door that goes into the right cubby. And I'm going to see if I can get that on a good angle so you can see that. There was damage here. Now, before I took it off, I wasn't sure how much damage or what kind. I had looked down from the top. I saw that it had a break. And we can see that that break is right along the side here, too. And it goes right through to the screw hole. So, that is what we are going to talk about today. So, this was not a surprise to me. I could see right away, looking at the cabinet, that something had happened. And based on where it had, the little wood putty or wood fill repair was, I, going in, had a very good idea of what happened. Now, when I first saw the piece at Let's Antiques, and I opened that cubby door, the right one, it didn't close properly. I had to sort of jostle it to get it closed. So, bingo, problem there. And then when I looked at the hinge side of the door and saw the fill, it was pretty clear what happened. I knew that would have to be fixed. They did a cosmetic fix the first time around. They never addressed the real problems. So that is pretty much left for me. Now, you always do your repairs before you do your refinishing. There are a couple of reasons for that. One, if you have like a chunk missing or two pieces that need to be glued together, you glue them together or replace the missing chunk before you even try to clean it. Once you start cleaning the piece, you can create gaps. You can alter the way that piece will fit back into its home. So you do that first and then worry about cleaning it, restoring it, refinishing it, whatever. That comes after the repair. So there is a sensible reason for it. In this case, what we had was a purely cosmetic repair. They didn't bother to take the door off the hinges, to look at the screw hole, to try to repair the big crack. Just, here, let's patch up the part that's visible in the front. In a way, that's good. Because you never know if the person who was working on it before you actually had the skill to do the repair properly. If they did have the skill, oh well, it would have been nice if they did it. But if they don't have the skill, well, hallelujah, I do not have to try to dig glue out of that joint. I need to dig wood putty out of whatever's missing from the front. Oh, by the way, it's probably wood fill and not wood putty. I tend to use the term wood putty sort of generically and frankly incorrectly. Some kind of wood fill they've got in there. Putty could just be scraped out. This one's probably going to take a little more work than that. So the good news is I do not have to fish glue out of that crap, which would have been probably impossible, because if they had just stuck glue in and not clamped it properly, the glue would have filled in the gap and I'd be stuck. So in a way, it's good that they didn't repair it. And I don't know who they are. Probably the dentist. I don't know. So I'm going to see about forcing some glue into that crack and using a mechanical bond as well as the glue. So let's take a look at what the possible fixes are. Okay, now let's see if you can see this. When I squeeze this, you can see that the crack closes a bit. Now, that's because the repair was not done properly to begin with. I expect that what happened was when this door was open, hanging out, somebody must have leaned against it. This is not an uncommon problem. So there are a lot of fixes for this. Somebody's sort of, I don't know, half-baked fix, that's what we'll call it, was to put some kind of wood filler in here and just sort of hope for the best. Well, we really can't do that. First of all, the hinge isn't working as well as it should. That is unsightly. That needs to be fixed. And I've been giving a lot of thought to how to do this. And I do not believe that glue, or at least glue alone, is going to do the trick. So I think what I am going to do is measure this out, get myself a screw, and run a screw in probably right about here from the back side. So it'll go in here and get it in far enough so it catches the front side. Now, I am going to have to clean it out. I'm going to have to clean out this wood putty or whatever is filling this in here. I am probably going to try to glue and clamp it. And I've got some good clamps, thank heavens, and see how far I can get with glue. But glue alone is not going to do it. That is a stress joint. If I do this with glue alone, I'm going to be right back in the same situation in a few days, a few months, a few years. So that's why I'm going to look at the screw option. So let me take one of these screws out just to show you what I mean. Now the screw I use is going to be larger than this. But when you put a screw in, the screw head will grab this piece of wood. That will hold it in place. And then, as it twists through, because the hole on this side is going to be a little larger than the shaft of the screw. Then when it goes through here, it will grab and pull this piece back as I tighten the screw. I may need to do 2 screws. I am probably going to have to do the screw shopping very carefully, but that's how I think it's going to work. I think it's going to be a combination of a mechanical hold from the screws and the glue. And then whatever is going on in here, I may have to re-putty that. It's hard to say. I won't know until I take it apart and actually do it. But that's going to be the major repair on this piece. But absolutely has to be done because, as you can see, this screw hole is compromised. Now, ordinarily what people do in a situation like this is they try to drive in a larger screw. that only makes things worse, because a larger screw is just going to expand the crack in the wood. So that is not the route we are taking. We're going to fix this as best we can and try to make sure we get that little bugger working properly. That's number one, and looking good. And that's a very close second. So, next up is continuing to remove our parts prior to painting. And that includes all of these knobs. And fortunately, since the knobs are all the same size, they can all go in the same baggie. So the first step is going to be pick that wood fill out. And I don't know what I'm going to end up with once that's done. In all likelihood, I'm going to have to put new wood fill in. Who knows? Could be quite a little mess. I will be forcing some glue down into that break. It looks like the wood was just split. And then over time, because nobody ever did anything, and moisture gets in and wood swells and warps, it just sort of settled into a wide open crack. I'm going to see about getting some glue forced down in there, and then I am going to clamp it tightly. Now, I have some good clamps. This is not something you can do with little pinchy clamps. I'm going to need the kind of clamps, and I have them, fortunately, that, you screw and you can just pull those pieces back together. If I can get the pieces pulled together with the glue, then I am not going to have to rely so heavily on the screw to pull the pieces together. But let me explain how that screw thing works. You have two pieces of wood. In my case, it's the same piece of wood that's broken. You drill a hole into one piece of wood, the back side, hopefully, because this is going to be a visible repair. You drill a hole, you drill it a little larger than the diameter of the shaft of the screw. And, of course, you can help disguise this by countersinking the screw head. And that's drilling another hole, a shallow hole, big enough to hide that screw head, to recess it. Put the screw in, you don't have a hole on this piece of wood. So it goes through this piece, and it's not screwing, it just goes straight in. When it hits this piece, and you start turning that screw, it grabs this piece of wood, and the more you turn, the closer it brings it in to the other piece of wood. This is the part where the screw head is. It's basically a mechanical bond. Whatever happens with the glue, I will probably run a screw in there, no matter what I do. I have a great concern about the amount of stress. We've already got a break, so we know that's a stress point. I will probably back it up with a screw. If I do that, I'm going to make sure the screw is long enough to go through both sections of wood so that it goes through the back side almost to the end of the front. And there's the trick. I don't want it to poke through the front, but almost I want it to grab as much of that wood as I can. And that will be a permanent fix. So, I don't like the fact that I will have a screw head showing on the back of my cabinet door, but it's got to be dealt with. And a functioning cabinet door against a screw head on the inside that I will paint over, I can live with it. But it has to be closed up. the gap in that crack. The screw that I pulled out of that cracked hole was just hanging loosely in there. So it wasn't even working. It was just, I just popped it out. I did not need a screwdriver to take it out. So it wasn't doing its job. If I have any problems with this, getting a screw back in, I will not be going over to a larger size screw. There's a better fix. You can take a wooden match, because it's very soft wood. You drop it into the screw hole, break it off, and then just screw right through. The wooden match will take up any slack. It's one of the easiest fixes. Instead of going over, and people do this all the time, on doors especially, when the hinge has a problem and the screw gets loose in the hole, and door hinges are huge for this. And what they do, pop out the screw, stick in a bigger one. No, you don't need to do that. You just grab a wooden match. I keep wooden matches all over the place, specifically for this purpose. You just stick it in, break it off, because it'll snap off. So pop it in, snap it off, because you don't want the match head in there. I have a feeling that would be very dangerous. Put your screw back in, and it'll do the trick. Like I say, the match stick will fill in the gaps very nicely for you and give you a good fit again. So that's where we are at this point. I am putting effort into those doors because the doors are at eye level. They have that beautiful glass. It's the first thing you're going to see when you see the cabinet. You're going to be looking straight at those doors. So I want to make sure they're really done properly. But as I've said, what we're looking at here is the right way to fix stuff. Permanent fixes, not the usual sort of, let me show you how to do this on the down and dirty. No. This one is going to be the serious, no shortcuts restoration job. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to see you all next week. We're going to do our little slideshow, have our little calm down moment of Zen, and hopefully I will be a lot cleaner the next time you see me. Have a great day.